Hey everyone, welcome back to the CAD Thinkers YouTube channel. This is our second video in our series of creating a functional, moving prosthetic hand with computer-aided design techniques in TinkerCAD. In our last video, we showed you how to make any project move with the articulated hinge and the pivot hinge. For the rest of this series, we'll be showing you how to make a moving functional prosthetic hand from the aesthetics all the way down to the functional hinges we showed you before. In this specific video, I'll be showing you how to make the based hand model, but in later videos of the series, our instructor Neil will be showing you how to make the hand actually flex. So let's get started. So we're going to begin with making the palm of our hand. To make this palm, we're going to be using a simple trapezoidal shape that TinkerCAD already has in its basic shapes. So you can go to the search bar and search up trapezoid and go to the first option. After dragging the trapezoid to your work plane, give it the dimensions of 15 by 61 by 79 millimeters. After editing your trapezoid's dimensions, turn it over 90 degrees with the arrows provided and bring it down to the bottom of your workspace. Now this will serve as an incredibly simplified version of our palm. And if you want to add any landscaping with cylinders or spheres or the scribble tool to add any curves, feel free to, because that's how your natural hand generally looks. But for the simplicity of this project, we'll be leaving that out. Alright, so next we're going to be making arguably the hardest part of our hand design, which is the finger. We're going to start off by just dragging a cylinder over to the work plane. Change the cylinder's dimensions to be how you want the first joint of your finger to be. Meaning, if you're looking at your finger, what would you want this half of the finger to look like in terms of breadth, depth, and size? Now we're going to be using very specific dimensions for our base project, but if your fingers or the fingers you want to design are a bit thinner or thicker, feel free to change them. Alright, so after you've got the desirable dimensions for your cylinder, just turn it over 90 degrees and the same thing, bring it to the floor of the project and make it in the same orientation a finger would be in comparison to your palm. Alright, so the next thing we're going to work on is making the very specific curvature that a finger has. If you look at your own finger, you can see almost half of a parabola for your curved finger. And so to do that in TinkerCAD, we're just going to be using the scribble tool. Draw the curve you want to put onto your finger with this scribble tool. We're going to use this to carve the curve that we want on each one of our fingers. Click done and your scribble should be on the 3D work plane. Now the next thing you want to do is orient your curve to be how you would look at your finger from a side profile. And since this is the whole first joint of your finger, the cylinder, you're going to need to change the sizing of your curve until it actually looks like a finger appendage. Just keep adjusting your curve size until it looks like almost a carved out, drawn version of your finger from the side. You also might need to adjust parts of your curve after you've already moved them around your finger. So for example, for me, there's this extra curve upwards that will just cut into the finger later on and not look super natural. So I'm just going to erase that by double clicking on my scribble curve and just erasing the last part of it. Alright, so this curve is looking pretty spot on to me, so I'm going to make it into a whole object. So it's just going to curve and carve out that part of my finger. And then I'm just going to group both of these objects together by clicking Shift and holding it down and then clicking on the two objects I want to group. The grouping tool is up here in the top right corner. So now I've got kind of an outline of my finger shape, but all of this extra stuff is totally unnecessary. So the way I'm going to get rid of it is I'm just going to drag and drop a few different types of shapes to try to fill in this extra piece we have to our finger. I found that cubes and triangles are the most useful for this. So basically I'm just going to make all of these objects a whole and then try to fit it into all these extra pieces that I want to get rid of. Alright, so now that I've gotten rid of that extra shape that used to exist right here, I'm going to just carve out the bottom of this finger in a rectangular shape to just give it more of a natural view. Our fingers aren't complete semicircles, there's a flat surface right here, so I'm just going to add that within this design. Now our finger shape should be looking pretty natural and done. To make the fingernail, it's pretty simple. We're just going to drag and drop a box to the work plane, two cylinders, and a semicircular shape. Now again, we're going to be giving this cubicle shape very specific dimensions for our fingernail for this base project, but if you'd like to make it a bit thicker, a bit taller, just feel free to change these dimensions. Alright, so after making the base of our fingernail, all we're going to need to do is curve off these two edges of the fingernail and then provide a larger curve on the bottom of this fingernail to match the shapes that ours generally tend to have. The way we're going to do this is we're going to make that big bottom curve with this semicircular shape, and all we need to do is put it on the same orientation as the cylinder, and we're just going to carve out a curve into the cylinder. Just overlap your semicircular shape or semi-cylindrical shape and your cylinder, and then make your semicircle a hole and group those objects together. Then make this entire object a hole, and you can adjust it to match the bottom edge of your fingernail. So after you've gotten the curve how you want it to be, just group those objects together. And for the top two edges we're going to be curving off, just do the same thing you did before, but instead of using a semicircle as a cutout, we're just going to use a really small cylinder. Just orient the curve on the top two edges of your fingernail and then group all the objects together. Alright, after doing that, we've gotten our fingernail shape, and we're just going to lift it and place it on top of our finger here. You can also adjust the dimensions on this step. Alright, so after your finger design is done, we're just going to group all of these together, and we're going to copy and paste them 4 more times to make each of the other fingers. Now you can kind of adjust the sizes of your fingers based off of what looks most realistic. I'm just going to make a few of my fingers thinner and make the thumb a little bit thicker to match with the size and shape of my own hand. After this, you can adjust the spacing and placement of your fingers to match more of the hand. After this, you can adjust the spacing and orientation of your fingers to match more of how a hand is actually structured. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make the middle joints of these hands. The reason there's so much space between these two things is that we just did the top joints of each of these fingers, but now we have to make the middle joint. So to do this, you're going to click on one of your fingers and click ungroup. And click and group as many times as you can until everything is ungrouped. Once that's done, you're going to want to shift and click on the only two objects you need to make the middle joint, which is this cylindrical object and the rectangular hole underneath it. You're going to click Command C and Command V or whatever your copy and paste controls are, and this is going to serve as the middle joint of your finger. Just group your middle joint together. Sometimes regrouping a finger like this can be super annoying, so I would just duplicate one of your other fingers. After this, adjust the size of your middle joint to kind of look more like a finger. You might need to make each of your fingers a little bit shorter and make your middle joint a little bit longer. It's really up to you and how you want your hand to look. To make your finger design shorter without causing all of the other components to squish, you're also going to have to just ungroup these shapes and only click on the cylinder and shorten that. Alright, with all of your fingers shaped and all of your middle joints placed, the last thing you might want to do is add some differences between your fingers, right? So the index and the ring finger are generally the same size, but your middle finger will be a little bit taller, your pinky finger will be a little bit shorter, and your thumb will be a little bit wider. So just add these changes through the dimensions that you just changed to add a little bit more realism to your hand. Alright, so once you're done adjusting all the sizes and spacings of your fingers, you're done with the base hand model of this project. Generally, after finishing a project, I like to group it all together and make it one base color. For the gaps between each finger and the palm and fingers, those will later be filled in with the ball and socket hinge and the articulated hinge to make this prosthetic hand actually flex and move. So stay tuned in for the rest of this series to figure out how to make your prosthetic hand actually move. Alright, well, thanks for watching, everybody, and I sincerely hope you continue with this flexible hand project. If you'd like to volunteer and help out with CAD Thinkers, you can either subscribe or check out the link in our bio, www.cadthinkers.com, where you can apply as a student volunteer and help us make these incredible online workshops, as well as maybe even help teach some of our in-person kids. We would love your support and help. Thank you!